Now, daytime. Sarah Kennedy chairs a discussion about the disease AIDS. Included in the programme is a filmed interview with an AIDS victim, which some viewers might find distressing.
Hello and welcome to Thursday's Daytime. Well, today's programme is not quite along our usual lines. For a start, they've allowed me to sit down, and just for once, our daytime audience won't be chipping in with questions and their opinions. Now, the reason for this is that today we're trying, with the help of expert medical knowledge, to dispel some of the myths and the muddles that surround AIDS. And we'll be speaking to the first British sufferer of AIDS to talk on television in this country. Well, it won't have escaped your notice that the papers have been increasingly preoccupied with the number and the circumstances of AIDS fatalities. The government and the medical profession have told us that they consider some of the reports to be irresponsible and scaremongering. So, to put the record straight, we're joined by Dr. Jonathan Weber of St Mary's Hospital in Paddington, who's treating AIDS sufferers and researching into the virus, and Richard Wells, an oncology nursing advisor from the Royal College of Nursing, and John Patton MP, the Junior Health Minister, who's been with us before. Dr. Weber, briefly, can you explain exactly what AIDS is?
AIDS stands for the Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, and it's a new viral disease, first recognised in 1981. The virus itself attacks cells in the blood which control the immune system, and infected people can lose their ability to fight off infection, and some affected patients will die of the complications of the disease.
So you don't actually die of AIDS?
You don't die of AIDS itself, you die of the complications through not having a functioning immune system. It's a disease which is present in the blood and is spread by blood and by sexual contact.
I'm sure we'll come back to how it is spread a little later on. Richard Wells, now the Royal College of Nursing is highly respected both in and out of the medical profession, and yet you've come up with figures. You estimate that 1 million AIDS victims could exist in Britain in 1991. Now the DHS have said, now come on, this is ludicrous, because on those figures, by 93 we would all be dead, whether we were gay, pink, white, female or whatever. Now why have you come up with these figures?
Well, you've answered the question yourself, because the government actually stood up and said something, which was one of our main thrusts in issuing those figures. We didn't estimate that that would happen. We said that if the disease carried on doubling at its present rate, unchecked, that's what would happen. And that is, in fact, what will happen if it goes on. Nobody believes it will, but the most important thing is that it's actually opened up a proper debate with the government about what we're going to do about this vile disease.
Are you saying the government is not doing enough, or it is?
I don't think it's done enough in the past, nearly enough. I mean, we had 2 years advance warning of this disease. It began in America in 1979, you know.
2 years advance warning. Are you doing enough?
We're doing a very great deal. We can only go so fast as the advances in medical science about this disease will actually permit us to go, and we're going very fast indeed. What we've also got to do, of course, is not just to back new discoveries, which will help us to screen for and to test for the presence of AIDS, and also, God willing, one day have a cure for it. But what we've also got to do is to work with voluntary organisations and others to try and do what we can to get as much of an attitude of responsibility as we can in those people who are in the most at-risk groups, because prevention is critically important to stop it growing any faster than it already is.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, in a moment we'll be looking at other aspects of AIDS and how serious the situation is in Britain. What are the symptoms, how do you get it, and what progress in the research field. But now we leave the studio, and on film we're going to join Khalid Aziz, who's talking to Bill Ayers, a computer engineer aged 37 who has AIDS.
The word AIDS start to enter your thinking?
I first of all just thought I had the flu and refused outright to allow any doctor in the place, because I don't even like I've never even taken aspirin. And I had a bath and nearly fell over and nearly killed myself. And at that point I said, call the doctor, because, you know, I'm ill and I don't know what's happening. And as I was talking to the doctor, I informed him that the symptoms are telling me I've got double pneumonia, and with all the other symptoms, it's painfully obvious I've probably got AIDS.
When you were admitted to hospital, how were you treated there by the staff?
Their concern was written on their face, and they treated me with as much kindness relative to their knowledge.
Did you get the sense that they were worried or panicky about the fact that you might have AIDS?
No, they were totally panicking. As much as I was. They were as panicking as much as I was. And their panic, in some respects, probably made things a little worse for me. I mean, I was very ill. I couldn't stay awake for more than 10 minutes. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. In reality, I thought I was going to die. But as I understand it, I will never be cured of anything. They can, with the use of modern drugs, keep it under control. I am still on very large doses of antibiotics for the pneumonia.
When it was finally confirmed officially that you did have AIDS, what was your reaction?
The nightmare was when I was told I had AIDS when I was in Bath, which was before Christmas, probably nearly a month before. I'm sorry if I'm vague there, because the past to me is now totally irrelevant. The future is the only thing which is important to me. And I probably have got these times slightly mixed up, but to me it's incredibly unimportant. When I was told I had AIDS there, I thought I was going to die, and that was it. To me, it was a nightmare for me, obviously, I think, like anybody. I laid there and I thought, well, goodbye, cruel world. I mean, that's all I thought, and said, well, you've played hard, lived hard for 37 damn years. Just sad. That's all I thought of. Nothing, really. I'm dying. And that's all I thought of, nothing else.
What do you feel about the approach of the state towards your problem?
Well, there isn't any approach by the state, is there? And the state is not interested. It's shown no interest. I mean, it waffles, but it shows no interest whatsoever, does it?
In what way?
Well, it's given us, I think, a derisory $250,000 for research into a problem which is so painfully obvious that if you added a naught or two noughts to it, you might possibly be coming somewhere near solving the problem.
Do you understand the public fears that there are about AIDS?
Of course. They know nothing. The state makes a dog's breakfast of everything it says about it, so it's not really surprising that they react and are scared out their box. So am I.
But you have sympathy for people who are frightened about coming into contact with people like you?
Absolutely. I, in fact, have since found out, by the way, not informed, but found out that it is not as contagious as the officials seem to indicate. And of course that is then reflected in the nightmare headlines in the gutter press.
Why have you decided to talk about the fact that you've got AIDS now?
Well, I'm going to die. I don't want to die. And nothing really is being done. The government has made a derisory offer of money, or given a it won't even pay for the office space and a secretary and a few typewriters. I'm a taxpayer. Lots of homosexuals, we're all taxpayers. We contribute to society in greater and lesser extent, and I'm sorry, it's totally inadequate and it's absurd. And it's selfish. I want something done. I don't want to die.
Bill Ayers, and thank you for talking to us, Bill. John Patton, he didn't mince his words. The dog's breakfast, he said, there's no approach by the state, no government initiative, government doesn't really care, no interest, no nothing.
Well, I can understand Mr. Ayers' state of mind, and I can understand his feelings, and I sympathise with him very much. However, we, just as much as Mr. Ayers, want desperately to be in a position to say, yes, we can identify in carriers of the virus itself, a virus that was only discovered some 9 months ago, categorically discovered some 9 months ago. We want desperately to be able to say, yes, we can find a cure. That's why we're backing research. It's not a matter of just being able to say, well, look, give us the money and we'll be able to provide the cure. We can only go as fast as medical science will take us.
The money is going into research, yes, but he is at grassroots level with AIDS, with perhaps 18 months, maybe 8 weeks to live. There's no money ploughed into the hospitals, to the dentist who say he's going to get his teeth done. Nobody seems to know what to do.
No, every conceivable medical aid and help is given to any homosexual, any heterosexual for that matter, who suffers from AIDS. And there are about 60 or 70 at present in this country, apart from those who unfortunately and tragically have died over the last 3 or 4 years. No one's being denied the necessary medical help that they need to ameliorate the symptoms and to make their period of illness and perhaps tragically into the run-up to their death as easy as possible. But what we do not have is a cure.
Well, I don't really. Within existing NHS limits, then the hospitals which already exist with present staffing are having to meet the demands of AIDS within pre-existing budgetary restrictions and staffing. And nobody has had any help for routine clinical care from the DHSS to look after AIDS.
Dr. Weaver, what are the symptoms? We know, I think everyone in Britain knows it's predominantly attacking the gay community, but what are the symptoms?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that it's a viral infection, and with any virus infection, different people respond differently to it. And in fact, what we call AIDS is only the far end of the spectrum of infection. And it seems that the majority of people who are infected by the virus have no symptoms or signs whatsoever. They're perfectly well, but they can carry the virus, and perhaps more frighteningly, they can infect others. And this is, I think, the most alarming aspect of the disease.
And how is it passed on, Dr. Weaver?
Well, the virus is present in the blood. And as with many blood-borne viruses, they are well transmitted by sexual intercourse. Not just homosexual intercourse, but any form of intercourse, homosexual or heterosexual, can undoubtedly spread this virus.
So can women get it as well?
Yes, women can get it through vaginal intercourse. In addition, it's spread by blood, which means also by blood products, and which is why haemophiliacs have been affected by this disease, because the clotting factor that they need can be contaminated by blood, often from donors who have no idea that they are infected.
Dr. Patton, if you, God forbid, got run over by a bus when you leave this studio, can you give us a guarantee that the blood in the banks there will not be contaminated?
We hope so. We cannot give an absolute cast-iron guarantee. Of course we can't, because unfortunately some homosexuals who seem to have been infected with the AIDS virus have carried on giving blood. We are developing, as fast as we possibly can, a screening test. We're doing this with all the money that's been asked for. We've given the money. I must say, and I hope you won't mind my saying it, I think Dr. Weber has been more than a little unfair on the government in saying that we're not putting enough resources into hospitals. We have had not one request for additional money from one health authority in this country. We're dealing with a very small number of people, I'm very pleased to say, so far, who have actually contracted this disease. What we're also doing is developing our blood products laboratory, so by 1986 we'll be self-sufficient in blood products like blood factor 8, which hitherto we've had to import a great deal of from the United States, and hence some AIDS virus getting in that way.
And donors are paid in the United States,
That's
so
right.
If you're unscrupulous, obviously that's coming in. I
That's
do
right.
believe, though, that you were given at least 10 years warning, successive governments by the medical profession, that we need our own plasma, but we've still been getting it in from the States, haven't we?
Yes, well, that's why we're going ahead and building, which we have for the last 3 years now, our new blood products laboratory, which is actually going to produce this, blood product.
Richard Wells, myths. People think they can get AIDS from lavatory seats, from shaking hands with gays. They think it's come from the Russians, it's germ warfare. Can you knock some of those down for us?
Yes, all of them. None of them are true. Jonathan's already said how this disease is transmitted. You can't catch the disease from drinking from somebody else's cup or shaking hands or even sitting and cuddling them. You know, if you're intimate with them, then the possibility is there. But I'd like to take the Minister to task, because I agree with what Mr. Ayers said. There hasn't been enough money invested in this disease, and I don't truly believe we know how he's feeling. I think it's a bit easy to jump off on that one. There hasn't been an investment of cash in the education of the public, in the education of the health carers, in nursing care. Because people aren't requesting financial assistance, that means that other patients in the health service are having to go do with less. What we need is an investment of money at basic level in those centres which are seeing the majority of these AIDS patients.
Thank you.
It's not happening.
Mr.
right,
Patton,
that's,
75% of AIDS sufferers are in London. Now, there has been a case, I think it's true, that a man has waited 10 hours in a drafty corridor of a hospital because he's got to go into an isolated private ward. What is being done now for AIDS victims now so that there are beds available, places for them to go?
Two separate issues here. One is the treatment of AIDS victims, and I don't know about the particular case that you've cited. I can't answer about that. All I know is that in all the cases of people who've gone to the NHS seeking treatment, they've been given it, and given it straight away on the day in which they've gone. But we can't obfuscate the issue entirely by going back to the old arguments about, well, this is all a matter of resources. If only the government will put more money in, it's going to be cured tomorrow. That's absolute nonsense.
But what's being done now?
What is being done now is twofold. Anyone who's got AIDS gets the treatment such as is available to give, and it's not very much, unfortunately, because we do not have a cure and we're not remotely near having a cure. And secondly, we are putting into two major research projects ourselves substantial sums of money to see if we can develop better blood screening tests. The other half of the coin, however, is stopping the problem spreading, and that is critically important, and that's something where government needs all the help it possibly can.
Doubling every 6 months, isn't it?
It's not doubling every 6 months, no. That's an estimate which the Royal College of Nursing put forward, which has no foundation whatsoever.
Dr. Weber, is it?
It has doubled in the last 6 months in this country, and it did double in the 8 months prior to that. So if it's not doubling every 6 months, it's very close to it.
Yes. Well,
Dr. Weber, can I ask, you throw into the pool quite sort of casually, women can get it, and I think people at home are going to say, well, if women can get it, children can get it, heterosexual husbands can get it. How safe are the British public at the moment from an epidemic? I mean, the press are calling it a plague. How safe are we?
Well, we must be realistic. It is a sexually transmitted...
We're going to be realistic.
It is a sexually transmitted disease, but it is still, even in London, at a relatively low level. In homosexual men in London, we have reason to believe that a proportion, perhaps 15%, are already infected. But we believe very few of those are going to go on to develop AIDS. In the heterosexual population in London, in this country, it's extremely rare, and there have been, to my knowledge, only 3 cases in this country.
Of women and children, or...?
Of women. There have been no cases in children in this country, and there have been perhaps 50 in the United States. We know that women, once infected, can pass it on to their children in the womb. And so, obviously, that is very alarming. But that, again, is what we would see with other viral diseases. It's not special to AIDS.
Richard Wells, how would you advise the public to protect themselves?
I would advise them to go about their everyday life as they've been doing for the last 50 years. But I still want to come back at the Minister, because we're spending a lot of time talking about cure and very little time talking about care. And what's important for these people, who are a very young patient population, is that they're going to die.
What range, actually, Richard?
Well, we're talking about 20 to just over 40. If you group them like that. And many of whom are going to die, and they are not getting enough basic support because the government is not investing enough cash in that basic support. I mean, the only organisation which exists at the moment to disseminate information about this disease is the Terrence Higgins Trust, which can only afford to operate 2 hours a day. Now, that is derisory. And something has got to be done to educate the public so that they will ignore what the gutter press are saying about this disease.
Thank you, Richard. You mentioned the Terrence Higgins Trust. I have 2 colleagues here from that particular trust. Do you feel that enough is being done, Richard, by the government?
It's Tony.
Tony, I do beg your pardon. I'm sorry. I was talking to Richard. I've got my names muddled up.
I think the government's being stung into action now, and I have every reason to believe, yes, that much more will be done. I think the questions we have to ask are why, for example, the Special Advisory Committee to the Department of Health is only meeting in the last few weeks, when we've known, anyone that reads the medical press will have seen this problem coming in all its ramifications: haemophiliacs, the National Blood Transfusion Service. The same kinds of scares over the prisons even have been repeated in the United States over the last 4 years. So it didn't need a lot of wisdom, just a little research to see what was going to happen, and for the government to have been more advised as to the possible developments, and to therefore advise the caring organisations and the voluntary organisations such as ourselves as to how we could all best work together in terms of counselling, teaching, prevention of this disease.
The number of cases of AIDS in the States is levelling off, and it's usually attributed to the fact that the gays in America have been very responsible in their sexual habits and have become perhaps less promiscuous. Are British gays adopting that attitude as well? Are they taking it as seriously as obviously Dr. Weber and his colleagues are?
Yes, I think those people that we're actually getting to with our information leaflets, and thankfully the Health Education Council has now published a leaflet belatedly, are, yes, acting more responsibly. And I think we're seeing a fall-off in the rates of gonorrhea among gay men here in London, at least. which is a small indication that people are being responsible, and I think that indicates that we have a lot more effort into education, regardless of the problems of actually finding a cure, which are immense problems. If we have more input into education, we will at least see some progress among the homosexual community as one of the major risk groups.
It would be a terrible thing, I hate using the word minority group, but you've had enough problems in your time as it is. Are you finding any intimidation towards the gay community now that AIDS has become such a scaremongering thing?
Well, looking at the way the press has treated us in the last week or so, and despite what the Minister says, nothing really is being done by the government. Yes, we haven't got the money to put into what the papers are doing. We can't afford to counter that backlash, exactly. And people like us, the Terrence Higgins Trust, do need more money. We need government funding, because what we're doing now, working on from volunteers, we just haven't got the manpower to be able to fight that kind of backlash that we're getting.
And Terrence, just to explain to everyone, Terrence Higgins was one of the first cases of AIDS to die in Britain. Let's sort of try and end on a positive note. Dr. Weber, how far is research now? Have you got anywhere positive?
Well, as the Minister said, the virus was isolated in March of last year. That was a major step forward in being able to deal with the disease. Some testing for infectivity is now possible in a very limited way, but further tests are required before we could screen the population, for example, and that's some way off. And that is the next step that we need, and I would have thought it will be here within the year. But I would point out that I think that it's highly likely, I'm sure the Minister would agree, that by the end of 1985 there will be perhaps 400 cases of AIDS in the country, which in the great majority will be in London. And within the context of decreasing resources for London hospitals, that's 400 high-demand patients. These are patients who are extremely ill, and although we can't cure them, many of their infections and tumours can be treated, and they're likely to be in hospital for long periods of time and require resources from the whole hospital. And therefore, we do have a real problem.
Richard, can I just come to you before I come to you, Mr. Patton? It's no wonder that there is a hype and that people are worried, because they hear that nurses are not very good at treating AIDS victims. They hear that pathologists won't look at the body. They even hear of cases of doctors and dentists who won't touch AIDS victims, and they're still alive. Now, what advice can you give, for counselling your own staff in some ways?
Well, it's very difficult, and I think if we'd started an education programme earlier, it might have been easier now. The advice to everyone is don't overreact, because there isn't a great deal to overreact about. But at the same time, we've got to, again, look to the Department of Health and ask what it's doing under the Code of Confidentiality to prevent this wide dissemination of private medical information which is appearing in the press.
How are names leaking out then, Mr. Patton?
I don't know. People give names to the press and to the media, as you know, to your benefit sometimes for all sorts of reasons. I must say, in this discussion, I quite often find myself as a government minister, you can imagine, being the only person who's being got at from reasonably enough from all around the room, saying, why isn't the government doing more? It's all the government's fault. I hope my two fellow interviewees here don't mind my saying that I don't think they've given a particularly even-handed account of what actually has been going on. We've got to face two facts. One is that every AIDS victim is getting care in NHS hospitals. No one's been denied it. They're all getting it. You have to set that very much against the fact that we do not have yet an adequate, fully tested screening test for the presence of AIDS, let alone a cure. And secondly, and I think it's a theme we haven't fully developed on this programme, it is very important that all of us work together, and I pay tribute to voluntary organisations like the Terrence Higgins Trust, work together to try and increase knowledge, rational knowledge, amongst the most at-risk groups in the community about ways they can actually prevent it. And that's a fundamental importance.
I don't think anyone is saying the government isn't doing anything. The major criticism, having listened to our experts here, is that it's too little and too late.
Well, I don't know about too late. We published our first leaflet warning blood donors about the risks of giving blood if they thought they got the AIDS virus in them as far back as 1983. What seems to have happened, particularly in the last few weeks, is newspapers generally, and a few newspapers in particular, seem to have blown it up into a very big story, and I don't think it's always necessarily been handled in a very rational way.
I take your point. Are you optimistic for the future, Dr. Weber?
For the immediate future, no, I'm not, in the sense the virus is here, it's established within the community, and in fact it's established within every Western European and North American country. It's a new disease which really has become epidemic, and I think the next few years are going to be quite a problem.
I'd have asked you this before, and we've only got 30 seconds left, and you didn't answer it that time, so again, what can the public do to protect themselves?
I think that in terms of the sexually active, have fewer sexual partners and cut down on particularly casual or anonymous sexual partners, male or female.
Richard, very briefly, do you echo that?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you all at home and all our guests here. Well, that's all for today. Goodbye from us at Daytime. And let's leave the last words now to a very brave man, Mr. Bill Ayers.
I'm glad that I wake up in the morning and I try to live for the moment and the future and not for the past. I have a little bit of nostalgia here and there, but I try to enjoy what I've got, my friends and relations, and just enjoy life, which is the only thing I really can do now, as best I can anyway.